Welcome to the Christian Readers Podcast, where you can escape into fiction without sacrificing your values. I'm your host, Colleen Mitchell, author of The Chronicles of Talam. Today is probably going to be a bit of a controversial episode. Today we're discussing Harry Potter, and whether it's okay for Christians to read this 7-book series that spawned 8 films, a spin-off series, countless books, over 1 million fanfiction stories, and shaped an entire cultural generation. What I'm sharing today is a combination of my own experience as a Christian who grew up reading Harry Potter and the research done by Marian A. Jacobs, author of On Magic and Miracles, a Theological Guide to Discerning Fictional Magic, which you heard more about last week. I'm very open about my love for Harry Potter. My godmother read the first book to me at age 6, and that was my gateway drug into reading. When I discovered fan fiction, I imitated J.K. Rowling's writing style, which led to me developing my own voice as a writer. There's no doubt I would not be a reader or a writer if not for the Harry Potter books. I also grew up in a Christian household, went to private Christian elementary and high schools, and experienced firsthand my high school's attempt to ban the Harry Potter books. I got around that by taking the dust jackets off and hiding the spine, but that's another story. While growing up, I never understood the hatred for the books. I never had my parents tell me we couldn't read them. In fact, when the 7th book released in 2007, my family was on a road trip and we had to buy 2 copies so my sister and I wouldn't fight over it. I finished first, in case anyone was wondering. In those early days of internet freedom, I remember stumbling across a website that had very Puritan opinions about Harry Potter, but it was clear from perusing the baseless arguments that whoever wrote it had not read the books. Not only were character and plot references incorrect, they made claims about content in both the books and the movies that never happened. Most of the people I encounter who are critical of Harry Potter, or are in a rush to tell others that the books are open doors to witchcraft, have never read the books. Across the board, they make assumptions about the story simply because Hogwarts is a school of witchcraft and wizardry, and characters cast magic spells and brew magic potions. Remember how we started this podcast? We have liberties as Christians. We can choose to partake or not in things that may grate against the consciences of other Christians. But we should not be creating laws or rules for others based on our particular view around liberties. Whether you drink alcohol or not is a Christian liberty. The church does not impose laws or rules around drinking. Whether you watch TV or not is a Christian liberty. The church does not impose laws or rules around it. Same for eating meat. Whether you eat meat or not is a Christian liberty. The church should not be imposing laws or rules around it. So, by extension, whether you read Harry Potter or not is a Christian liberty. The church and individual church members should not be imposing laws or rules around reading Harry Potter. If there's something in the Harry Potter books that makes you uncomfortable, then it's really simple. Don't read it. But also don't try to force other Christians to not read it either. I will again be quoting from Marian A. Jacobs' book On Magic and Miracles to make a case for why Harry Potter is not a satanic series, nor is it from the devil, nor was it written to entice children into the clutches of the occult, regardless of the very isolated cases where children who read Harry Potter did, tragically, go down that path. At the same time, this is not supposed to be a persuasive argument wherein I try to get you to read Harry Potter against your will. Rather, I aim to point out that simply reading a book, which includes plenty of gospel themes, by the way, is not going to doom you or your kids. I will try to keep this episode as spoiler-free as possible. Let's dive in. Point 1. Harry Potter by itself does not lead people to the occult. Paraphrased from On Magic and Miracles. Only 1.5% of New Age to Jesus testimonies specifically mentioned Harry Potter as an influencing factor for occult involvement. Those she interviewed insisted fictional magic was not a primary or even a secondary source for getting involved. The most common factors leading to involvement, cited by 70% of former New Agers, were a history of abuse, a traumatic event, or mental health problems. What happened then? Why all this vitriol and claims that the Potter series leads kids into the hands of the devil? When published in 1997, Harry Potter was caught in the tail end of the satanic panic of the 1980s and 1990s. Quote, at that time, Christians began to react to the fruit of the first wave of New Age beliefs and satanic cults that began in the 1960s and gained prominence in the 1970s. Christians engaged in panicked censorship, such as frequent boycotting of companies or holidays, burning supposed demonic products such as Cabbage Patch dolls, and censoring rock and roll music due to the belief that its rhythm was intrinsically evil. End quote. The fervor with which Christians and Christian institutions pushed against Harry Potter was largely a consequence of when the books started coming out. Open doors to the occult or demonic oppression require more than a book, a song, or a doll, ignoring Furbies and Labubu dolls, which are just horrifying on their own. In any case, Marian says it like this, quote, "It isn't the external temptations or worldly things that determine whether or not you're opening doors to demonic oppression, but a person's heart. Is worship involved? Is this secular book, film, or song an idol or a source of temptation? Is it shepherding your heart and mind toward unrighteousness? These are the questions people need to ask themselves because it's the condition of the heart that gives Satan a foothold in your life." End quote. Point number 2. The only discernment issue with Harry Potter is its magical methodology. Now, if you remember from last week's episode, the 5 questions for discernment are around the source of the magic, the goal of the magic user, heart posture of the magic user, relational setting, and magical methodology. They're listed in order of importance. This means that if a story checks boxes 1 through 4, but not box 5, it's technically better than a story that checks boxes 2 through 5, but not box 1. Marian provides her full breakdown of these 5 discernment questions in Harry Potter in the penultimate chapter of her book, but I'd like to give a summary of it here. The source of power in Harry Potter is not disclosed, but it's treated as, quote, supernatural as natural, end quote, which is like any other gifting or talent. In that context, the individual's choices are what matters. Both good and evil characters possess magic in the world of Harry Potter. The next 3 questions determine which side of good or evil a character falls on, but it's important to remember that just because evil characters exist and use magic for evil doesn't mean the story itself glorifies evil. Again, from Marian, quote, "Something is only glorifying evil if the plot and characters are holding it up as a representation of goodness," end quote. So, box 1, the source, is checked. Supernatural as natural is a common method for writers, including Christian writers, to present gospel-like messages to secular readers through common grace. Box number 2 is the magic user's goal. Harry's ultimate goal is rooted in fighting against the evil wizard who killed his parents, not as a revenge mission, but to defend the people he loves from Voldemort's tyranny. Harry never seeks out Voldemort to kill him, even if Harry does make some stupid decisions in emotionally charged moments. Box 2 is checked because Harry is the protagonist or main character who is loving others more than he loves himself. And Voldemort is the antagonist or villain who is choosing self-glorification at the expense of others. Box number 3 is the heart posture of the magic user. Harry is consistently portrayed as humble and more concerned about his friends than himself, since he constantly puts himself in harm's way to protect them. Voldemort, on the other hand, is full of pride and sees himself as the rightful ruler of the wizarding world, and his campaign to seize that power is done at the expense of innocent lives. So we see box number 3 is checked. Box number 4 is the relational setting. Marian says in her breakdown, quote, "The upside-down kingdom where the first is last and the last is first is another major theme in this series. In fact, there are few books that do this as well as Harry Potter," end quote. It's in Harry's orphan underdog status, his best friend Ron's position as the youngest and often overlooked brother in a family of 7, and his other best friend Hermione's position of perceived inferiority, despite her intellect and skill, simply because of her parentage. Harry Potter contains strong anti-bullying messages throughout the entire series. Thus, box 4 is checked. And now we come to box 5, methodology. And this is the reason that Harry Potter stirred such controversy in the late 90s that it's still lambasted today. Quote, "So far, the Potter series has aligned well with divine supernaturalism. Yet the magical methodology is a mixed bag of demanding and dependent methods, and the reason this series is so deeply controversial," end quote. Again, Marian says, quote, "Although the nuance of Rowling's magic system doesn't perfectly align with something like Wicca or other forms of demonic supernaturalism, I want to affirm that the use of spells and potions is confusing for Christians who are skeptical of the Potter series," end quote. The series borrowed real and stereotypically occult practices such as spellcasting, potions, divination, and astrology. Now, I'd highly recommend picking up on Magic and Miracles to read Marian's answer to this question of methodology, because she goes quite deep into it. But the thing to remember is that with boxes 1 through 4 cleanly checked off, not checking off box 5 doesn't automatically make the Harry Potter books from the devil. Quote, "Even though the methodology in the Harry Potter series isn't an accurate depiction of the occult, it's still legitimately confusing for Christians to distinguish the difference, especially since many of the skeptics haven't actually read the books. From the outside, Hogwarts looks like a school that teaches children real occult practices. Without a deeper understanding of the story and the gospel-like ending of the 7th book, which wasn't available until 2007, long after the controversy had begun, A primary focus on supernatural methods led many Christians to believe the stories promoted the occult, end quote. So Christians weren't wrong to question it, but they were wrong to throw it in the trash without practicing the whole counsel of God and discerning the message in its literary context. So that brings us to the last point number 3. The series contains clear gospel themes. J.K. Rowling intentionally shaped the end of the entire series as a mirror to the gospel. In fact, she purposefully planned a gospel-like ending from the very beginning, but never revealed it ahead of time so as to avoid spoilers. Additionally, she's a member of the Church of Scotland, and she considers herself a Christian. Even setting aside the climax of the entire series in Book 7, themes of self-sacrifice begin in the very first installment when Harry chooses to go on alone to the climax of the book so that his friends can go back and get help, and thus keep themselves out of the very danger that Harry will face. From Marian, quote, Rowling is constantly redirecting back to what a certain character, scene, or spell means about human nature. It isn't just about magic as magic for her. It's about what her books mean from a literary standpoint. The reason so many books have been written analyzing Harry Potter is because they are deeply metaphorical and philosophical in nature. This is one more example of Christians needing to consider the meaning of a story from a literary point of view, rather than taking everything within the story literally. For example, this series is not mainly about a boy who goes to magic school, but a neglected boy in an authoritarian home who is finally given agency for the first time in his life. It's not mainly a story about, spoiler removed, and counter curses, but about love having the power to conquer death. Without the ability to understand the meaning behind the magic, we'll miss the message in its entirety. End quote. I once heard a pastor preach a sermon which made it quite clear he had never cracked open the first book, let alone read the entire series, before concluding that they were anathema and proceeding to tell the congregation exactly what he thought. After the service, I asked him if he knew that scripture is quoted in the final book. He said no, and he sounded genuinely surprised. But I wasn't. Like many pastors who preach against Harry Potter, this one didn't do any basic research to verify if what he claimed in his sermon was true. The 7th Harry Potter book includes a scene in a graveyard, wherein 2 tombstones carry verses of scripture. 1 Corinthians 15:26 and Matthew 6:21, both of which are powerful verses for any believer. 1 Corinthians 15:26 says, "The last enemy to be destroyed is death." And Matthew 6:21 says, "Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." Though neither tombstone in the book included the book, chapter, or verse numbers, any Christian familiar with their Bible will immediately recognize them for what they are, a statement of God's ultimate power over death, and a reminder that the only treasures we can store up in heaven are souls. When we die, we take nothing with us. What waits for us in heaven are rewards from following Jesus' commands to love one another, building right relationships, and pointing the lost to the salvation that's only found in Jesus. Harassing fellow Christians, or unbelievers for that matter, over the supposed dangers of Harry Potter is not how Jesus wants us to act. So, to recap, number 1, most people are drawn into the occult by trauma, abuse, and mental health issues, not fictional magic like Harry Potter. Number 2, the only discernment issue with Harry Potter is the use of questionable methodologies like spellcasting and potion making. And number 3, the series contains clear gospel messages. I'm glad I read Harry Potter as a kid. I'm glad it shaped my childhood and sparked my love for reading and writing. I'm glad I was able to absorb the messages of the books during those formative years because they're powerful themes for children to learn. Self-sacrifice, friendship, anti-bullying, the struggle between good and evil. Humans live stories. The more stories we can read that mirror real life and point to a higher purpose, even if it includes fictional magic, the deeper our relationship with the Lord becomes. I hope this has been a good lesson and case study in using the discernment hierarchy presented on Magic and Miracles, and I hope that if you feel led to, you might enjoy the Harry Potter series if you haven't already. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. If this resonated with you, please share it with your friends so they can learn something new about Harry Potter. God bless, and until next time, goodbye.